Previously on World Cinema History.
We never quite made it to France yet. We'll get there. When they make a good movie. No, I'm kidding.
I mean, if we were going by public opinion, we're getting a bunch of requests for something Godard just because that movie Nouvelle Vague or whatever is out now, but God, I just don't want to watch Breathless again. Jesus Christ. Erin, what are we watching this week?
This week, we're watching bout de souffle, réalisé par Jean-Luc Godard, et après ça, Nouvelle Vague, réalisé par Richard Linklater.
Are you kidding me?
Well, fuck. It was a dark night in the city that never sleeps, and I wasn't doing much sleeping myself. There's this face that haunts my dreams, dour-looking face, always has that kind of serious look the Swiss get when they talk about money or chocolate. Sunglasses, nose always up in the air, usually going off about how Edgar Ulmer and Jerry Lewis are misunderstood geniuses. Guitar. It's gotten worse. Now this cat, Richard Linklater, there's this new movie about him, in the making of his first film, Breathless, called Nouvelle Vague. Now all of social media is racing to prove they liked Godard before it was cool. It reminds me of that old joke. What's black and white and red all over? A newspaper? A nun falling down the stairs? Godard's pretentious sunglasses? No, it's the cinematic influencer Jean-Luc Godard and his first film, Breathless. I'm Eric Trommater.
I'm Jennifer Trujillo.
I'm Erin Brown, and this is World Cinema History.
There's a specter haunting Netflix right now. The specter of Nouvelle Vague, Richard Linklater's new movie about how cool and chic it is to make a low-budget French movie, is high on great period costumes, well-structured performances, and Nouvelle Vague uppity bits of pseudo-existential nonchalance. It's charming. It's well-acted. It's even cute. But cute isn't what we're here for. To get to the truth behind the costume party, I'm turning it over to the panel. Erin, as someone seeing Breathless for the first time after seeing the Linklater gloss, what are your opening thoughts? Because I'll be honest, I hated Godard long before it was cool to hate Godard. And now that it's cool to love Godard again, aren't I just being consistent? Or am I just a hater? Does the reality of this film live up to the chic and the myths for you?
I had to watch Breathless before I watched Nouvelle Vague. Just my brain needed to know what they were going to be talking about. Yeah, I watched Breathless. That's a thing I saw. There were things to it that were really good. The story was not one of them, but there were things about that I thought were really good. And then Nouvelle Vague, I actually really enjoyed that because I love the mechanics of the filmmaking, especially with no budget, because that's what I'm used to when the films that I've made have all been zero budget. So it's a lot of fun to see, how are we going to fiddle around with this to make it work? And then Godard is just such an insufferable brat, but also kind of charming at the same time. That was so entertaining. I actually really like Nouvelle Vague.
Jennifer, your first thoughts on both films?
I've heard you talk about things about this and reference it, but I had never seen the film Breathless. I didn't even know that it was such a monumental film. Yet again, I'm learning, which is great. I'm learning along, hopefully with other people that are listening. But I had no idea. I was grateful that I did it the opposite way. Erin, Sela had suggested watching I thought it was a mockumentary. Was it a documentary or a mockumentary? It was a mockumentary, right? Or was it a fictionalized documentary?
Recreation. No, it wasn't supposed to be a documentary. It's a fictional recreation. Like A Complete Unknown last year. What was the Freddie Mercury movie that I hated that everyone else loved? Yeah, like that.
I took it with some humor, so a fictionalized mockumentary is really where I was. I was glad I watched it first because it totally educated me to a degree on what I was going to watch because I didn't look at anything, I didn't read anything. I was ignorant going in, honestly. This was such a monumental film that changed things. The film itself, it was interesting to watch from the perspective of what I had learned about it from the mockumentary before I went and read anything else, even. The storyline, I agree. I mean, I don't know that I loved the characters all the way. I don't know the storyline. There were things about it I liked. I thought it was fun to watch what came out of, these efforts of trying to run and gun, trying to be different, trying to break the rules, which he did. And I could see some of I'm just going to edit it to make it work. And for me, I didn't realize, that it was the birthplace of many of those things, if that's true. I saw that he was breaking the 180 rule, but that even happened in Tokyo Story, right? So, I mean, he's not the only one that's done it, but he did a lot of it, breaking rules, it looked like. What I came away with the most, I guess is what I'll say, is that now I know that this is a film that influenced many, many, many other filmmakers and films and has sort of brought us the current iteration of a lot of the films that I know. And a lot of the films that I work in are independent films, as to what Erin said, right? People that are making the best with what they have, with a limited budget, with the tools that they have, with the locations, with the lighting, with the schedule, all of that. And I'm grateful if that's the case, that if this is really the time and the film and the filmmaker that allowed people to break rules and to change things so that we have the variety of styles of films and we have the amount of independent films and continue to get independent films that we have. If people didn't just do it, to quote someone that's been a guest on the show, Nicole DeMonesis, do what you can with what you got and just get something out there, right? Like make films, tell your stories. Nicole is a champion of that, and she does that, right? She makes things happen. So to that, I'm grateful to this whole thing. And I'm grateful for the opportunity from this podcast to have watched what I thought was the mockumentary and then the film to sort of understand that and I could see images in there that I've seen in Scorsese films or Quentin Tarantino films or other films. Is it because that is what Scorsese ingested so much as a kid? Like, my understanding is he went to the movies a ton, and then, we're influenced by people around us. They say that imitation is the best form of flattery, that you start watching other things and absorbing and saying, oh, I like that. That's cool. I want to do that. Is that where all this came from? Like, I'm hoping, Eric, you will explain more things to me, and Erin as well, like what you know about this, what you've learned about this. Yeah, I mean, this is about my experience more than the films, but I liked both films for a learning opportunity. It was funny and interesting to watch the mockumentary, and the film itself had some cool stuff and had its moments, and it was really fun to see things that were discussed or explained in the mockumentary come to life in the films, like the moment with the street lights coming on, all the hype and build up with that, and then that moment, right? And I could imagine someone when they saw the film being like, oh, genius, they captured that moment. And it wasn't him, it was his producer, apparently, at that moment. But Eric, did you feel any different watching both of these films? Did you rewatch them this week? And what happened for you?
I did. But this is not the films Eric likes and why. This is world cinema history.
Oh, yeah!
I would love nothing more than to spend 70 minutes just shitting all over Godard, Breathless, and everyone who likes it, but that's not what this show is about. Breathless is one of those films that it doesn't matter whether I like it or not. It is historically important. It is part of our cinematic canon. And Godard, whether you like his films or not, and there are some films of his that I like, and we're going to watch one at the end of this series called Weekend. Most of his films that I enjoy on the kind of Ken Russell knowing camp level, but you have to respect that he was along with, say, Orson Welles and Alfred Hitchcock, and maybe as a modern-day example, Martin Scorsese, among the most influential directors in the history of cinema. This episode, I think I'm going to focus on history and historicity, but I don't think anybody listening to this episode is going to ask themselves, now, did he like Breathless or not? I can't tell.
I think we can tell. I think we can tell your opinion.
We were joking before the show that in the god-awful long hotel scene that she opens up the window and throws the cigarette butt out. I wanted to fly with the cigarette butt, get the fuck out of that hotel and those two people. That would be how I felt about Breathless. Maybe it doesn't hold up historically because so much of what was innovative about it has become a part of modern cinema.
That's true. That so much of the innovation from that film is something that we see all the time now, and I think that's why it has to kind of hold up to a degree. This is the first time they did these things. This influenced everything that came after it. I think that's the value of the film, even if you don't really enjoy the film that much. Which I thought the story was terrible and just nonsensical and boring. And
it had a story,
right? Yeah, it was just scenes that they kind of cobbled together, and then it ended.
I think the great thing that Nouvelle Vague does is show us what is wrong with Breathless was that it was shot without a script.
Yeah, and the actors getting annoyed with that was so relatable,
I was annoyed with it watching the film.
Having the actors improv their dialogue is certainly a choice. I think you need the actors to be good at improv to do that, and I'm not certain these actors
No, you
were.
don't. No, you don't. But how about this? Don't improv while the film's going through the camera.
Yeah.
You do
and
your
have them come up
improv
with-
during rehearsals, and you can't do that if nothing's rehearsed.
Exactly, and that's the issue, is that nothing was written down and nothing was rehearsed. It's like just do it on the day and just improv it. And they didn't know what to do, and so they came up with stuff, and it was annoying because the characters were just so irritating. I know that, Michelle was supposed to be a thug and unpleasant and all that, but I don't know. It's like he was supposed to be, but also not supposed to be, but the not supposed to be was overshadowed by how annoying he was. Patricia was just there. She was just going along with whatever was happening, and that was so irritating because her choices didn't make sense. Like, why did she turn him in at the end? That made no sense to me. I know it's supposed to make sense on some level, but it's like, why would she do that? And then she explains, if I could be mean to you, I don't really love you. And it's like, so you turn him in for murder? That's your... Instead of just leaving? What? Why is that the solution instead of just, leaving him?
Okay, that part actually, I thought was one of the better parts of in the biggest inverted commas in the history of the show script. She's pregnant with his child, and so she's actually making a decision for two at that point, I think. Does she really want him to be the alive and in his or her life father of that child at that point? And once she's decided no on that, given his kind of pestering personality, which, let's face it, he would be called a sex pest today.
Yeah.
Well, how about this? How about you sleep with me? No. Okay, but if you slept with me, no. But hey, how about you sleep with me? Yeah.
Yeah. It's not consent if you have to break down the walls to do it. It's not. It's gross. It's so gross. He kept grabbing her ass. I just wanted to punch him in the face. Like, that is so inappropriate.
I don't have any problem with characters being dislikable.
Yeah, he was very unlikable.
But don't lock us in a hotel room with these unlikable characters for half a fucking hour.
Right. That was just
okay.
Kept going.
Let's get off bitching about the film.
I think a lot of what you said is valid and legitimate. The improv when a camera's rolling, for me, that happens a lot in a lot of the LGBTQI plus or queer cinema that I watch, especially the independent. And there's actually, I'm probably in this room from a cascade of events from a filmmaker, Alexandra Swarens, who that's a big part of her style. she has an incredible following despite doing no marketing and despite the fact that a lot of her films are improv. I think she writes a loose script and outline. I believe, as a director, she gives people prompts and lets the camera roll and then talks them through with prompts about where she wants them to go. She does star in a lot of her own films, and again, I don't know that I realized it originally. It was again through time and talking and listening and watching and hearing her being interviewed that I was like, now it makes sense that this is what she does. I don't know. Now I want to ask her about whether Godard. I know, like, The Children's Hour, she loves that film. I don't know whether she was influenced by Godard.
She was. Now,
Because she loves
she
films.
doesn't have to, and she doesn't have to have seen a Godard film to have been influenced by Godard.
Which leads to the point of where you're
about.
going, right? That it's an important film that influenced
because
almost all films after it, or other filmmakers.
I can't watch a TV commercial without thinking about Godard, because almost everything that you see in music video and advertising editing initiated as something that the French New Wave in general invented, or at least perfected, and Godard popularized. But let's get into the history, shall we? Because this is a history podcast, not a bitch about Godard podcast. Before we get into the heavy lifting, we're going to open a new wing of this show just for the series that we're doing on French cinema that I'm going to call Bazin's Corner. André Bazin was a man who co-founded Cahiers du Cinéma, the magazine that you see all of these future filmmakers, such as François Truffaut, Claude Chabrol, and Jean-Luc Godard, writing for in the movie Nouvelle Vague. He was a mentor to almost all of them, but more importantly, he was my teacher. The one who taught me to stop looking at movies as entertainment and start viewing film as an art, to the pages of his collected works, which I read when I was in high school. Now, Bazin died in 1958, just as Godard and Truffaut were taking their first real steps behind the camera. Truffaut was working on the film that would become The 400 Blows. Godard was initially, as is shown in Nouvelle Vague, writing screenplays and making shorts. He never got to see the full arson of the new wave, but he saw the sparks. Writing about the energy of these young critics turned directors, Bazin said, "The cinema is an art of the real, but for these young men it is also an art of the spirit. They do not want to film the world, they want to film their ideas of the world." So Bazin gave them the matches, but I'm not sure he intended for them to burn the whole theater down. As we're looking at the films that Bazin loved in the coming weeks, we'll see the grammar he actually valued, a grammar of humanism that Godard would eventually trade in for a pair of dark sunglasses and a jump cut. While Godard was burning down the edit, the left bank group, people like Alain Resnais, Agnes Varda, and Chris Marker, were producing modernist works of their own. And outside of that bubble, directors like Louis Malle and René Clément were providing a rich, sophisticated tapestry of French cinema that these arsonists at Cahiers du Cinéma were ignoring. Here's a rogues gallery of the real people in Linklater's Nouvelle Vague. Suspect, Claude Chabrol, alias the Joker, the first to get a hit with Le Bout Sage. Suspect, Jean-Pierre Melville, alias the Lone Wolf, the guy in the Stetson and the sunglasses. He has a cameo in Breathless as the novelist interviewed at the airport. He's also shown in Nouvelle Vague, showing Godard around his homemade gorilla set. Suspect, Robert Bresson, alias the monk, the elder statesman they worshipped. He's seen in the subway shooting his film Pickpocket in Nouvelle Vague. Suspect, François Truffaut, the most famous of the bunch, alias the protege. Bazin actually bailed him out of a military brig. He wrote the original story for the film Breathless, but it's his own film, Shoot the Piano Player, that I deeply love. That means I'm not a hater, right? I do get Nouvelle Vague sensibility. I love films like Shoot the Piano Player, Jules and Jim. Erin, how much did I love Cleo from 5 to 7? I don't hate these films, just this one.
They're not all going to be amazing. You're not going to love all of them. And I think this is more influential than enjoyable.
Speaking of Agnes Varda appears in this film, alias the grandmother, representing the left bank. The only one who actually knew how to use a camera before the revolution started. Suspect, Jean Cocteau, who we will see later in this series when we do his film Orpheus, alias the Ghost, the aging, elegant gay poet who was being buried by history at that point for his neutral stance during the Nazi occupation. He is shown at the premiere of Francois Truffaut's 400 Blows in Nouvelle Vague. And suspect, Jean-Luc Godard, alias the Arsonist, the one who raided the petty cash and burnt down the edit. Seeing these personalities in this film, did you actually have an idea of this being kind of a gathering of great minds, or were they just kind of a bunch of characters that you didn't know? Perhaps if someone were to watch an Avengers film who'd never read a comic book, and say, well, okay, who the hell are they and why can they fly? Or did you get the idea that these were actually some of the most important people in that time period in French cinema history?
I think they did a pretty good job of establishing that they were important because, I mean, they talked about, Truffaut and Chabrol. They established that they were important. They showed other folks making their films. I think they did an effective job of saying these people are all influential and part of the same circle that are all going to be producing this art as we go along. I don't think you need to know exactly who each one of them was. They certainly didn't tell you that much. I loved how they would introduce people by having them look sort of at the camera and just have their name pop up and just hold on them for a minute and then move on. But there are so many names, there's no way you're going to remember them.
A very Godard thing to do.
Appropriate. It worked. I liked it, but there's no way you're going to remember all the names. But there are enough names in there that you're going to recognize, that you're going to understand, I thought, what it was that they were establishing.
Names like Francois Truffaut kind of flow easily off of my tongue. I think of him almost the same way as like a Martin Scorsese or something. I mean, he was actually in Steven Spielberg's Close Encounters of the Third Kind as the kindly professor. As he aged, he became an Academy Award darling, constantly winning the Academy Award for Best Foreign Film. Was it seeing him as kind of this young revolutionary, kind of what your impression of Truffaut was, or did you kind of realize that this was somebody who was going to go on to become somebody extremely important?
I don't know that I picked up enough on Truffaut, but I did agree, like Erin did, that they established that all of these people who they did mugshots, breaking the fourth wall, moments with were important. I recognized some of the names like Agnes Varda because you did, the Cleo movie, and I learned from this podcast before this, so that was helpful. I have questions about something separate from that, like on the fact that somebody actually wrote Godard a script, and then he took that script, tore it apart, or threw it away, just took the money and the people who were backing the film, if I understand right, and then just did what he wanted. And he wrote day to day or had ideas, not even day to day. It took him days sometimes. I mean, I'm blown away with the fact of what he did with a budget and a film like that. I don't know, Erin, if you were given that budget and 20 days to shoot, what would you do? Would you waste the days? You would film, I imagine. But
yeah, I would be shooting everything and anything I could. If I had the budget and I had the time, I would be making the fuck out of that film.
But you're not a narcissistic filmmaker.
It's his hubris, right? His narcissism. My God.
Yeah.
Well, and the other side of narcissism is your susceptibility to your own self-doubt. Only a narcissist can get to about 1 o'clock on a shooting day and say, well, I'm out of ideas, so we're shutting down, which is what Godard does here.
Yeah, that is absolutely bananas.
Well, and the thing is, the diaries that Linklater's film is based on show some even crazier thing. You see Roberto Rossellini, the neo-realist Italian filmmaker in this. Godard actually at one point just kind of took a day off to go see the premiere of a Rossellini film in Italy and then come back, and still ended up shooting all of Breathless in 20 days without affecting the rest of his life. I mean, you hear the stories like Spike Lee and Woody Allen, and the New York filmmakers, they stop shooting at 5 o'clock if the Knicks are playing at 7 o'clock because they always have tickets or what have you. But that's after like shooting for hours and hours and hours on, like a 12-hour, 13-hour shoot, and then they end it. Whereas Godard, if he wasn't in the mood, he was just like, okay, we're done. Everybody go home.
I think that's why it was funny to me that he quoted Duke Ellington and said, "Don't give me time, give me a deadline." Like, sometimes you can get your best work done if you have a deadline, even if you fuck around before the deadline. And that's what it looked like he was doing. It was what a weird character he was. He was like equal balance, insufferable brat, and lovable scamp. It was like, I don't know if I ever had encountered this person in real life, I would love working with him while also wanting to punch him in the face. I think they showed that really well.
I would only be the second half of that, but there's a part of the Godard character that Linklater doesn't show in the film, and I think he has a good reason for not. He makes this group look like they're a bunch of equals, but the bank accounts, they tell a different story. Truffaut was a kid from the streets. Chabrol fought his way into the group, starting out actually as a delivery boy and working his way up the ranks. Godard was the son of a Swiss physician and a mom born into the Haute-Barzilly family, which is the most wealthy family in French finance. We're talking the elite of Protestant high society in both Switzerland and France, the kind of old wealth that not only owns a street but owns the castle on the end of the street. This kid from the Swiss elite was slumming it in the Latin Quarter. When he raided the Cahiers petty cash drawer, it wasn't because he was starving, which I always thought that was an interesting parallel, of course, to the scene where you see Michelle taking the money out of the girl in the hotel's pocketbook. The way that Linklater kind of parallels the two scenes and the way he shoots it, the scene in Breathless. At one point, he hawked his grandfather's first rare edition book collection to fund his lifestyle. He was a kleptomaniac, but with a gold-plated safety net. So the reason why Godard could just say in the middle of the day, fuck it, I can't think of anything, let's go home, is because if he got fired, he wasn't going to be sleeping under a bridge.
I like how they showed, in contrast to that, they showed Rossellini taking the sandwiches and putting them in his pocket and then asking for money when Godard dropped him off. Like, the guy was known, he was famous, but he didn't have any money.
Well, and he was Ingrid Bergman's ex-husband at that point. And
that's true, too.
The father to Isabella Rossellini. One of the most beloved filmmakers in Italian history, but he had that scandal of having divorced to marry Ingrid Bergman, who also divorced her husband to marry him in Catholic Italy. And like D.W. Griffith and so many other people before, he fell on hard times.
It's interesting to show that, but then Godard is this rich brat that can do whatever he wants to, and he'll only fail upward, basically.
Well, and I think it explains a lot of his attitude in later films, where a film like Contempt, he basically took the worst part of Breathless, which I think all of us would agree was the hotel scene, and then made the whole entire film the hotel scene, and named the movie Contempt because he had complete and total contempt for the audience, and the ending of Contempt is laughing at you for thinking that what you watched was deep. That's something only a really rich guy would do.
Hence the insufferable brat aspect to his personality. He was such a weird character in Nouvelle Vague. I don't know about him in real life, but in Nouvelle Vague, that's why I thought it was kind of charming, because of...
It doesn't even... He got weirder as he got older.
In Nouvelle Vague, he was likable to a degree.
I felt like he was likable in Nouvelle Vague to a degree, because I think they softened the character to make him more likable to the audience watching it, because it really was a mix of brat and lovable scamp kind of a thing. But I think that was a deliberate choice, and it made it a lot more fun, because if he was really as unlikable as it seems like he actually was, I don't think anybody would have liked the film.
He was absolutely likable, but he was likable in that sort of way that it's funny until they turn on you.
I mean, I think everybody has good and bad elements, so I think they did a nice balanced job of that. And it would be interesting. Like, my curiosity is piqued. Like, is it just the interpretation for the new film, or And did the new film come off of journals or diaries? Is that what I heard one of you mention, Eric?
Well, okay, and this is going to sound like a criticism of the film, and it's not. But actually, no. That film could have been written if you read like a Wikipedia article, IMDb, and maybe 6 or 7 wiki quotes. But the reason for that is because Breathless is probably the most journalized and recorded film in history in terms of while they were making it, because it was being produced and made by a bunch of journalists. Every part of making of that film was photographed, journaled. Every single member of the cast and crew had their own daily journal. We have preserved the entire budget, so we know who the third assistant cameraman on Stage 6 was, or what have you. I think the reason why he chose the making of this film as opposed to a film like Contempt, starring Brigitte Bardot, knowing full well that it was going to have a bunch of Brigitte Bardot fans come see it, and then made this as boring as humanly possible to make fun of people coming to see the film because they thought they were going to see Brigitte Bardot naked, only to have the American producer be disappointed that the film didn't have Brigitte Bardot naked. Sent Godard back to go shoot Brigitte Bardot's naked rear end, which becomes the opening of the film. Godard is forced to edit that back into the film. The censor board then says, you can't have a film opening with Brigitte Bardot's naked rear end. And the American producer then took the censor board to court to force them to allow to be screened the scenes of Brigitte Bardot's naked rear end that he forced Godard to put back into the film because he wanted to exploit Brigitte Bardot's naked rear end. Much more interesting story, but a lot less documentation. Or the making of his film version of Shakespeare's King Lear, which features Molly Ringwald and Woody Allen, and was actually just a pyramid scheme that Godard used to rip off an Israeli investor. Or the making of his film Hail Mary, which is the only film I can remember in history to get not only 2 thumbs down from Siskel and Ebert, but banned by the Pope. So yeah, he could have picked any Godard film, but I think the reason he picked Breathless, and for good reason, is because you can go to any scene in Nouvelle Vague and there is at least some documentation of something that happened, because it is probably the most documented film in history.
I mean, that makes sense. And it's also, if it's true, unless it's some hubris narcissistic claim that, this is the film that started all these other things, which I don't know. I have some suspicions that there were small bits of these things happening in other films in the French New Wave and before him.
Gee, and you think?
And that, he took credit for it and let the credit happen and then blew up the credit.
Are you saying the guy who robbed the magazine's petty cash drawer might also have stolen a few ideas from other filmmakers?
Right, and he stole from his own family, yeah. And took credit. It seems that way. I don't know, that's my suspicion. I have a whole nother thing that I don't understand in watching the film, the newer film about the making of the other film, that they recorded a lot, they edited jump cuts through, they did the whole thing, it looks like, in like what would be now ADR post, recording the sound and the dialogue, but at times the mouth is actually moving, it looks like, in sync to the words. Or did he literally just edit what little bits made sense in an attempt to make it link together? Like some of the film lines he fed them, or that carried through from both, like, the Faulkner quote or other stuff, like those we knew were sort of in each, but there are other parts. Yeah, you have an opinion. Go, tell me.
They just do a lot better job of syncing up ADR in France than they do in Italy, where they don't care.
Meaning it's close enough because they're so used to dubbing, or they've been doing it for so long, or I'm confused.
No, it's actually quite the opposite. They don't dub films as often in France. That was a budgetary concern, so they didn't have to shoot with sound, and so they could shoot on the streets and not have to worry about. Godard's soundtrack for Breathless is very innovative, because every footstep, every street bike, every fork stripping against a plate, etc., is all added ADR. And all the dialogue is added ADR. And if you watch a lot of other French films, and again, those small handheld cameras, so extremely noisy, they ended up having to dub them anyway. Breathless and pretty much all of the Godard films have not only the best soundtrack, but even when he was dealing with an international cast, he took a lot of care to have them kind of open their mouths in ways that could sync later. And even if the dialogue changed, he would shoot from angles where you couldn't see their mouth quite as much. And he took a lot of care. It was something which a lot of filmmakers during that period didn't, and became very sloppy. But I would definitely give credit to Breathless for being very innovative in terms of its use of ADR. And the fact that it was completely ADR, well, so was Umberto D, but obviously they didn't take the loving care that Godard did. But it is interesting that he took that kind of care with the soundtrack, but not with the editing.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask. Like, so usually you get picture lock and sound that, you know what I mean? Who wrote the script that is the film? Who wrote all that dialogue? Did he write that eventually later with different pressure, with help? Did somebody else do it for him and he just took credit? Like,
Nobody,
I mean,
nobody actually. Francois Truffaut wrote the story, and there was initial bits of dialogue with the story. Godard would show up. He'd have his little notepad, just like it's shown in the film. They actually did a very good job of this. He'd have his little notepad. Say, you go up to the deli counter, you ask them how much it is for a cup of coffee. You reach in your pocket, however much change is in your pocket. That's how the scenes were developed. Same with the scenes in the hotel. So, for instance, when they're talking about William Faulkner, Godard just had in his notebook, hey, Gene Seberg, bring up William Faulkner. Jean-Paul Belmondo was like, who the fuck is William Faulkner? Godard off stage would say a quote from William Faulkner, and Belmondo would say something to the effect of, well, that's just stupid, or whatever, and that's how the dialogue developed. That is a very innovative way to make a film, and I think, for instance, we talked about Taika Waititi, I think. Whether or not he's ever seen a Godard film, I can't watch a Waititi film without thinking about Godard, because Waititi uses the exact same technique that Godard developed for shooting Breathless.
I don't know if he's seen one of his films, but it wouldn't surprise me if he had, because he's definitely got a very artistic background. And even if he hasn't,
saying he doesn't. I'm saying it doesn't matter if he's seen his film, because it came from Godard, whether or not Waititi was influenced by it directly or by other things that were influenced by it, which are influenced. The results are the same.
Yeah, that was what I was thinking about when I said that your actors need to know how to improvise when you have them improvise. That's what he did for what we did.
Christopher Guest with his films, his Spinal Tap and onward, was explicitly influenced by Godard.
Yeah,
and in Waiting for Guffman, there are several scenes that are parodies of Godard films that could only have been made by someone who had not only watched a lot of Godard films, but studied them.
And I'm going to have to rewatch Waiting for Guffman, because now that I've seen a Godard film, I can watch that and pick it out from Waiting for Guffman.
Then who wrote the script that is the dialogue that was done in ADR? Like, there is at least
that was improv at the time too,
words.
But they had to sync to the lips on the screen. So you're sitting in the studio, they're projecting what's on the screen. Now, like for instance, the New York Herald Tribune scene, he's shooting them with their backs to the camera, so when they're in the studio, they can decide what they're saying to each other at the time. And to Godard's credit, he hadn't decided how the film was going to end yet at that point when he was shooting that scene. He can put little hints at the ending in and have their dialogue kind of foreshadow that. And at the time, they're just saying, as you saw in Nouvelle Vague, they're just saying nonsense until, they come up with something better for ADR.
I sit here flabbergasted. Understand. I mean, we said failing forward. Talk about a white man of privilege failing forward. My God.
Seriously, it's what they do. It's,
It
that's
is
the
what they
world we
do,
live
and
in.
I've seen it a lot, and you've seen it a lot, and I sound again
Yeah.
like an angry feminist lesbian, but holy moly.
Nothing wrong with that. Especially in
mean,
this political climate, we need angry feminist lesbians to speak up. That's what we need a lot more of.
Well, and I might be an angry feminist lesbian who also fails forward, so I have to be clear about that. I'm a procrastinator, I get that.
The incredible thing about Jean-Luc Godard is that nobody understands his film, not even Jean-Luc himself.
And that is why Eurotrash has prepared a little educational film for you, my British chums, explaining exactly how to watch a Jean-Luc Godard movie. For the real new wave effect, it's good to mess up your hair a bit. Then you must smoke. A lot. Juxtaposed sound effects and jump cuts are important. Continuity is a nasty word here. Throw in a love story and some self-referential film within a film stuff. A bit more love story, and then the ever-popular cinema as a mirror of society's scene. And when in doubt, stare. It can be in any direction you want, just stare.
We're going to be looking at films from 1937 through to 1967's Weekend, and we're going to see a lot of what Godard was both reacting against and stealing from at the same time. So, for instance, we're going to look at a film by the I before mentioned Jean Cocteau called Orphée. And I don't want to spoil that episode, but on its surface, if you take away a lot of its metaphysical meaning, resembles Breathless in many, many ways. As we go through this series on French history from 1937 to 1967, starting with Jean Renoir's Grand Illusion, we're going to see Godard as both somebody destroying and reacting against the cinema of France's past, while also actively magpie-like stealing from it, attempting to peck little holes in what he saw was the beautiful corpse of French cinema.
A film is automatically a fragment, even a classical movie, because it's parted in two pieces. One close-up is a piece, and a long shot after is another piece. But maybe in my movie they are aware of it, and in other movies they try to make the audience forget that a movie is a pieces. But I think anyway it's pieces of the world, so why mask, why avoid it?
For all the talk of revolution, the early New Wave was also a fortress of ego. That's why, for my money, the film that actually survives the test of time isn't Breathless, it's Agnes Varda's Cleo 5-7. Varda proved that you can break the grammar of cinema without having to be toxic about it. Nobody in Breathless is particularly likable. That's not the problem. Almost all of European cinema is filled with unlikable characters. The film, to Erin and I anyway, wasn't likable. It wasn't the people in it were insufferable. The scene in the hotel room with them was insufferable. And that's why I prefer Varda and her way. Both Breathless and Cleo from 5-7 give us a wonderful low-budget tour of Paris at the time. Breathless is the more influential of the two, and of course Godard actually appears in Cleo from 5-7 structurally, from a screenplay standpoint, from an acting standpoint, and from all the things that we actually, if we were criticizing Breathless as a film as opposed to as a historically important work of art, Cleo from 5-7, it's just a clearly better film. But seeing the Swiss elite Godard is the language of the New Wave a real revolution, or just the grammar of a man who could afford to be annoying because he never once had to worry about a single bill? The other question that I have, because I happen to have two ladies in this room, I don't want to label angry lesbians or anything like that. You can self-label yourself, that's not my job. Is the kind of machismo of the French New Wave. And this even goes for the gentler films of, say, of Francois Truffaut. There is just something so incredibly male, white cis-privileged male, about sitting back and watching these films.
Breathless is a good example of, things that you've already mentioned, that there's a male who's sort of insufferable about pursuing sex, wanting to be the best at sex. With each time that they have sex, you need to tell me that was the best, that I'm the best, and pursuing and touching and owning and wanting her space, even whether she wants it or consents to it or not. it seeps through this whole thing of male gaze from the first shot of the woman in the newspaper, the opening shot of that film, to even seeing the women in the apartment who are having their pictures taken as models. It's interesting. They really talk about the Me Too movement pretty boldly that, oh, you want to be a model? No, but I'd have to sleep around. Oh, do you want to do this? Yeah, but I'd have to sleep around. At least our female protagonist understood that and wanted to sleep around to a degree on her own terms. I mean, she did say no, she did walk away, but she also took other lovers the same way he did, and that really made him wound. I don't know that women don't have hubris and we don't fail forward and we don't do things. We have all of these things. It's just quite saturated, quite obvious in this film.
Okay, but I don't think Agnes Sparta had the opportunity to fail forward the way that Godard did.
And I would challenge, I guess, that some of those other men in there that were hungrier in the sense of financially and otherwise, opportunity-wise, might not have had as much opportunities, right? Godard had every opportunity to do whatever the hell he wanted. And, people just said, okay, we're going to tolerate it. Okay, yes.
But they also gave him the smallest budget you could possibly give anybody. I mean, they gave him a budget so small he couldn't even shoot sound. He did do something with it, but again, he failed forward. But yeah, I mean, they didn't give him the kind of budget that they gave Truffaut or Chabrol or even Varda.
So he did have an opportunity. He did take an opportunity. Okay.
He did take an opportunity. I'm being fair here.
Yeah.
But nobody knew that Breathless was going to be the big hit, that Jean-Paul Belmondo was going to become the big movie star. Nobody knows these things. When people try to convince me that I should do a podcast on a different subject, because, this is just not a very popular subject, how do you know that? You don't know what's going to be popular a week from now. Neither did the people who made Breathless. Nobody who made Breathless thought that we'd still be talking about it all these years later, and certainly didn't think that it was going to become the huge international sensation that it became, or that Godard would become a byword for a type of film while they were shooting this in 1959. You don't know these things. Nobody does.
That's true. I mean, it would be interesting to watch, or to be a fly on the wall with the journals or some of those interviews that happened with the actors, right? From what it seemed like being annoyed to be a part of the film. I mean, the one guy was all in. The male actor was all in, but she was not in. She was annoyed.
There is a reason why Jane Seberg was so annoyed that doesn't get told in Nouvelle Vague. She had won a contest to be in Otto Preminger's film version of George Bernard Shaw's play Saint Joan, about Joan of Arc as Joan of Arc. And not only did the film do horribly, but she won the equivalent of all of the Razzie Awards and was blamed not only for just how badly the film did, but was just routinely panned for just giving an incredibly bad performance as Joan. So historians were mad at her, George Bernard Shaw fans were mad at her, Otto Preminger was mad at her, and so she was actually in hiding in France at that time to get away from all of the bad press that she was getting. In 1959, Godard came to her and offered her 600,000 francs to be in this film. This was like her only chance because she had this huge flop and her reputation was in tatters. And, of course, she then went on to become one of the most famous, and she only lived a decade more, unfortunately. She lived a hard lifestyle, but she became one of the most famous actresses in the world because of her appearance in this film that she had only taken because her first film that she had won this basically beauty contest to get into had flopped and she'd been blamed for it. But none of that is in Nouvelle Vague for some reason.
In the film, in the actual film, in Breathless, they bonded together. They had some level of chemistry or interest or friendship or mutual, like, what the hell is happening to both of us? Chemistry that I was like, I wonder if they had a real connection as friendship or more or romantic or otherwise off screen.
There was something about Godard's mannerism that they kind of bonded in a way. My favorite scene in Nouvelle Vague is when Godard is making his cameo appearance as the guy who spots him with the newspaper in Breathless. And she's sarcastically directing him using Godard's own words against him off screen. I don't know how true to life that scene is, but it doesn't have to be true to life because it felt real. But I do, and I think there was some of that kind of playfulness of being in a film like this.
Whose voices do the ADR? Is it them in studio watching themselves, or did some other?
Yeah, they did their own. They did their own dubbing. Zoe Deutsch, who didn't know a word of French going into filming Nouvelle Vague, 0 ADR. All of that is recorded live, so that's her French. They used a lot of AI and they used a lot of visual effects in that film, but they didn't to clean up her French or any of the dialogue. But obviously they were shooting in modern day Paris and they had to make it look like 1959. So of course there was going to have to be a lot of all the French cobble streets had been paved over, and so you had to make them look like French cobble streets again. So there's probably about 300-400 visual effects in Nouvelle Vague. I don't have a problem with them using them to do that. To make Paris look like it looked like in 1959 and to do it with such detail, to me that actually, it's very quite artful, and I think they do a great job in Nouvelle Vague.
Yeah, I didn't know they did that, and I would agree.
When we talk about male-gazy films, I almost don't even know what that means anymore, and then I'll watch a film like Breathless, and I'll be like, oh yeah, God, I can't believe chicks used to think this was fucking cool.
That's why I found her character so insufferable, Patricia. She only existed for the purpose of Michel to go to Paris. She was barely a character.
She was a haircut, striped dress, and a Faulkner club.
Yep, that's it. That's all she was. They didn't give her much of anything to do because it was about Michel, not about Patricia. And so she was there, and she was going to do whatever her boyfriend wanted until she turned him in, which was weird. And then they had that whole fucking scene with the author being interviewed, and he was just this misogynistic piece of shit.
That author, by the way, played by Jean-Pierre Melville himself.
Yeah, and he was annoying. I don't know anything about Jean-Pierre Melville.
Oh, yeah, but wasn't that the most sexist? And every question was sexist.
Yeah, every single one of them. And then
every answer was doubling down on it.
Yeah, it was horrible. And he ignored her when she first asked the question and then answered her second question in a way that was flattering to her. And instead of her being offended that he ignored her and just initially...
And in 1960, when this film came out, women all over the world went crazy for it.
Yeah, what the fuck?
and went crazy for Jean-Paul Belmondo. It's a generational thing. You can't explain it to me.
Well, this is sort of that nature or nurture, right? Like culturally, it's interesting that they even sort of reference the Me Too-ness. And, people get on me like, why didn't you do anything? And I'm like, do you not understand how I did do things and I took a stand in the era where I could to a degree? However, there's a lot of nature and nurture. There's a lot of cultural entrapping, that's
so
the way that it is, right? Like women wanting to be ogled when they walk down the street. Not me, but there are women I know that, something is wrong if they don't get looked at, if they don't get catcalled, if they don't get whistled. And they're like,
I have never once met anyone who, when I asked them how they met their husband, they said, I was walking down the street one day and he whistled and said the most disgusting thing and we were in love. Boy, oh boy, if I hadn't gone past that construction site that one day.
It's not about actually wanting to attract the women. It's about wanting to make us uncomfortable. It's a power thing. And that's why it doesn't.
And I think Godard does a great job of that. But it was actually the opposite effect. One of Godard's biggest advocates in the United States was Pauline Kael, the feminist film critic.
That's wild. But I mean, it was. I disliked Michel so much because of, God, he was so sexist and gross. The whole, like we mentioned, consent. It's not consent if you have to badger someone into it, but that's what he did. And every time
he was a sex pest. We'd call him a sex pest today. He was a sex
and every time he'd grope her ass, I was physically uncomfortable. It was so gross. It's like unwanted touching is a no-no. And I was really uncomfortable every time that happened. And yet she was okay with it. I mean, she slapped him a couple times for lifting her skirt, but when he was just groping her, she was like, okay, whatever. Gross.
We're gonna get accused, because we do every single time this comes up, using modern morality to judge a different time. And I'm going to say no, that is not true this time. Here's why. Okay? Because the fact of the matter is, there is a scene where she finally makes love to him, and we see that under the sheets and whatever. And it is made clear, right?
And it's the shortest love scene. Sorry.
Which I think Godard did on purpose because it's hilarious. And she makes it clear to him that she's only doing that because it's actually less work than putting up with his sex pesting. And you cannot tell me that that is that somebody watching that film in 1960 didn't get the exact same thing out of that scene at that time. That is not a modern day look at how that scene is framed. Godard is explicitly making that point.
Yeah, it's incredibly common. It's incredibly common to just, they won't shut up until you give in. And yeah, I know it was happening back then too. And it was always boys will be boys kind of a thing. But it's like, divorce isn't legal yet. No fault divorce didn't exist yet. So you couldn't leave a husband that was like that.
Well, in Catholic France,
it's
barely legal now.
Yeah, it's
she
insane.
Couldn't financially even exist on her own. Let's be clear.
That's
women,
true too. Yeah,
women couldn't financially or medically exist on your own at that time period. Are you telling me that you're saying Godard, you said he did it on purpose to show that she gave into his pestering, or I'm confused? Can you elaborate on that a little bit for me so I can connect the dots of what you were saying?
I'm implying it. I think Godard is not ignorant of the piggishness of his character, and he had a much more sympathetic view of women than the film might make it seem. But I'm also basing that on 30 other years of his work. He was also a provocateur. He puts things like that in because, yeah, he's just a typical macho guy. But there's another film that Nouvelle Vague reminded me of, which Francois Truffaut himself made, called Day for Night, about the shooting of a film, where Truffaut himself plays the director and Jacqueline Bisset plays his star in the film. And Godard wrote a letter after Day for Night became a huge hit and said, it is kind of funny that the only one who isn't fucking in that film is the director. And it was a pointed reference to Francois Truffaut, who at the time was having an extramarital affair with Jacqueline Bisset, his star in the film, because that's what stars did with their directors back then. How many times have we talked about that? Time and time. We talked about it with Ingmar Bergman. We talked about it with Michael Powell. It comes up again and again and again. Roberto Rossellini and Ingrid Bergman. How many times do we see that? It was it you, Erin, or was it you, Jennifer, who was talking about the model? So I can't do that because they all have to sleep around. The Me Too-ness of that. Godard writing that letter about Day for Night, he's a provocateur. He knew that was going to piss off the male establishment, and I think he put that scene in for the exact same reason. It is something for a guy like me to say, God, is that me? Am I a sex pest?
If it makes you think about that, that's a good thing. If it makes you question your own behavior, that is not a bad thing.
That's the upside of Godard, right? That's the upside of a provocateur. He's going to ask the uncomfortable question, isn't he?
And that's cool. There's a plus. There's a ding, 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 a plus in the Godard category from Eric in this conversation.
I've said positive things about him.
You have.
His sunglasses are ugly.
That's a big win for me, if he asked those questions and he cared about those issues. Or did he just ask them to poke the bear? But either way, raising those questions and issues is good.
He just asked them to poke the bear. Absolutely.
Well, it'll be interesting for me to watch more of his works, of ones that I know or don't know, and see what I learn and see what we talk about.
Well, we end this series with Weekend, which he made in '67, and I think you'll get a very good idea of Godard from this film and Weekend.
I thought they did give some agency to the Patricia character a little bit. I mean, she had a job. She was trying to make her own money aside from whatever else was happening to her. She's
a writer.
Right.
But because she's a girl and wants to become a writer, they also make her go out and sell the newspapers. Could you imagine a young cub reporter coming in and say, okay, but here's a sack of newspapers, go sell them out on the street?
She did that. She did the journaling. I mean, even with the guy, they did a good job of her. The actress chose to look a little bit annoyed at being asked the same questions and all the questions that we're asking and being hit on, and she didn't give up. She waited. She rephrased. I thought they could have edited that out, that she was clever and doing the best that she could to get at least something to write about of interest, despite what was being Fetter. I mean, the answers were all gross. The crowd was gross. He didn't care what was coming out of her mouth. That was clear. I felt a little bit like, good for you, girl. Like, you're trying.
Godard's ending is a total break. When Patricia looks at the camera, she's asking us to recognize the weight of what we just watched. This isn't Ozu's cast accidentally breaking the fourth wall. This is deliberate. Now, my question to the panel about both films comes from an old Wendy's commercial. Where's the beef? When Patricia is looking at us, what, if anything, was the weight of what we just watched? And we'll start with Erin Brown.
Honestly, when I watched Breathless, I was not certain about the ending. I was like, that's certainly an ending. And that's really all I thought about it. And her doing the lip thing where she touched her mouth like Michelle kept doing over the course of the film. I was wondering why he kept doing that. And it's like, oh, for this. But then watching Nouvelle Vague, how they did that scene was accurate. She came up with that herself. Because the idea of her stealing his wallet really did not fit the character and was an awful choice. I'm glad that she didn't make that choice. So I feel like the ending became more powerful once I knew where it came from. But just on its own, without knowing any of the backstory, it was odd, I thought.
Jennifer.
If I was in a class and someone said, you have to write a paper on this, I would have to dig for it. I might have to stretch for it. I mean, I don't know. I'm sure there's people that sat around a table and said, oh, this is amazing. This is what they were saying. And I don't know what those things are right now without help. Maybe if we started talking about it, maybe Sela would be here and throw one out, or maybe Erin or you have one. I don't know that I have any on first watch. And I'm willing to say this, right? I'm willing to be ignorant, and which is okay. I think it's a brave thing to say. I don't know.
It's a perfectly legitimate answer, though.
That's what I'm saying. I feel like it is.
I mean, I don't agree
know that there is
one. But it's perfectly legitimate.
Okay, great. Good. You will tell me what the beef is.
The beef of both films comes from the same source, and that's Camus, absurdism, and existentialism. The meaning of life is meaningless, and the meaning of breathless is meaningless. And the meaning of Nouvelle Vague is that a film about the making of a meaningless film should itself be meaningless. Erin Brown, where can people find you on the internet?
You can find me on Blue Sky at Toad Puppy, and you can find me on YouTube at Pizza Horse Productions. And you can also find World Cinema History at ko-fi.com/World Cinema History, and you can listen to all of our previous episodes and interact with us. Please leave us comments. We really like them. You can donate so we can upgrade our audio equipment. Yeah, so please come check us out.
We really like that too.
We do like that. We would like better equipment and not have to, take advertising.
Jennifer Trujillo, where can people find you and the Gilbert Baker Film Festival online?
GilbertBakerFilmFestival.lgbt, and on Instagram, Gilbert Baker Film Fest. And on Instagram, you can find a link tree and find all sorts of other ways to connect with the film festival, including TikTok, before TikTok changes. And then also through those places, you can find me, Jennifer Trujillo. And I agree with my compatriots here. Please leave us comments. Please interact with us in the comments. Please give us your opinions. We appreciate having them and the dialogue. Thanks.
Thanks, everyone. And you can find me at ETROMMATER on the artist formerly known as Twitter. You can find the podcast on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and all your podcasting formats. I also created a Facebook group for anybody who wants another place to have a conversation, and that's World Cinema History on Facebook. Thank you, everyone. Join us next week when we're going to go all the way back to 1937 to look at Jean Renoir's Grand Illusion as a part of our Road to Godard series as we look at the history of French cinema that Godard was attempting to destroy. Thanks again for listening to World Cinema History, and we hope to hear from you in the comments. Have a great one.